I want all of you to think about a scenario. Rewind roughly 7 years. Before game number 5, BYU football in 2010, 1-3, having played a tough early season schedule. Struggling offense. Quarterback situation up in the air.
There's an injury there.
And no, we're not talking about this season. This literally is 2010. It feels similar, doesn't it? It's time to relive what that was like and how BYU can change it with Brian Logan, who joins us on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. Brian, what is Utah State week like when the team is struggling?
Oh, man. Trying to remember back, too many concussions, so a little foggy. But, I think we were actually more optimistic going into this game. There's the sense of the rivalry and stuff like that. We knew that they were going to be pumped up. So, we had a little bit more excitement, being 1-3. And I think that the main reason why was this is a team that we could beat. We played against Nevada, and, traditionally they didn't really have, it's not a historic program, but, Kaepernick, balled out. And so we kind of said, okay, that's a good excuse there. Air Force, I think, ended up being ranked for a couple of weeks during that season. So we were like, okay, yeah, that's a legit team as well. And then obviously Florida State. So, I'm not trying to compare it to this year's team as far as the type of talent that they were playing, but we kind of felt that there were some excuses, I guess. So we headed into this week and we're like, all right, fellas, we got this one. We're good. We always beat them, haven't lost in 20-some years, so we're good to go. So a lot more optimistic than the weeks before.
And in that situation, they got the best of BYU in 2010. Now BYU sits in yet again a vulnerable position. Utah State's hungry. They'd like to take down BYU. BYU's won 30 of the last 35. Like, this hasn't been a close rivalry historically. Yet, here we sit in the same situation as 2010. So what advice would you give this BYU team if you had a chance to talk to them about being better in 2017 than that 2010 team was?
Yeah, man, to not have the mentality that that we have. Don't be optimistic. Understand that you are struggling for a reason, and don't use LSU, Wisconsin as excuses, because a loss is a loss at the very end of the day. And that's why we ended up getting the business, because we were like, man, we played Kaepernick, we played Florida State, we're good, and we still didn't have that fire, that sense of urgency. So we got up there, man, and we got slapped around the face, and we know what hit us. So that's the advice I would tell them is, treat every team like you're playing at LSU, like you're playing a Wisconsin, especially as you start to get into the latter half of the season.
Well, it feels like with the players-only meeting and the bye week to sit and think about everything that has happened over the first 3 weeks of the season, that BYU won't be overlooking the Aggies to any degree. That said, where do you feel like the BYU defense needs to make the biggest improvement to have success, specifically against Utah State?
So I talked to David Nixon, of course, about this the last couple of weeks, and then I talked to Grandpa B, not Uncle B, Grandpa B, Brandon Bradley yesterday.
Oh, okay.
I was like, who's that?
Okay.
and I'm like, B, man, what's up with these scenarios? And I already and Uncle B was there too, so all three of us were there chatting it up, and I gave him some scenarios that we had talked about. And he was like, oh, yeah, he agreed totally with us. And those scenarios came down to the pre-snap reads and just communication. And that was the biggest thing that Brandon said out of everything was just communicate. Everybody is chirping on the field right before the snap of the ball based off of the personnel, the situation, and what we see. And I said this to Uncle B. I was like, it kind of reminds me of a basketball team that's struggling to make points. And, the coach makes a rule that you got to have 10 passes before you shoot the ball, right? And it's kind of the same type of scenario to me where, you have to talk to at least three players before you line up and you look at the opponent across the field, just because there's so many pieces within a defense and within a scheme that, break down into half the field, and then that half breaks down into, other halves or other quarters, just depending on personnel and alignment. And so if you're not on the same page, man, you're not going to be in good coverage. You're not going to have good leverage, et cetera. So I would say that, man, is communication and really pre-snap, before the snap of the ball, communicate with your guys.
BYU had 11 turnovers or takeaways last year through 4 games. They only have 3 this year. What role do you think more takeaways could play in this overall success of this team, Brian?
Oh, I mean, it's huge. I mean, that's usually the factor in any game when you win or lose is takeaways. So, I mean, with a struggling offense, you give them a shorter field depending on where you get the turnover. So it's much easier on them. You get them more opportunities to score and put drives together, and then you get to rest. Sit back, get you some lemonade and or in this case pickle juice. And get stretched out. But yeah, man. I mean, so I would say it's probably the factor more than anything else in the game of football.
Brian Logan with us. He lived the scenario in Logan 7 years ago.
Logan and Logan.
1-3 BYU going up there. Yeah. Logan and Logan was not a good thing, and that's why we're asking you what needs to be said, Brian, so we will pass along those messages. We appreciate the insight, my friend.
No problem, guys. Have a good one.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, we will.